Namaste and good afternoon, everyone. I, Ritika Gupta, Assistant Director at IMFRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi, extend my heartiest welcome to you all to IMFRI Web Policy Talk. Today we are here for a special lecture on women's representation in India. The speaker for today is Dr. Ranjana Kumari. The event is being organized by Gender Impact Study Center at IMFRI as part of the series, The State of Gender Equality, #Gender Gaps. I would now like to welcome our moderator for today, Dr. Simi Mehta, who is CEO and Editorial Director at IMFRI, to introduce the program and our speaker further. Ma'am, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ritika, and a very good afternoon to everyone. As many of you would know that women's representation in public spaces, including the social, economic, and political domain, has been far from praiseworthy. Their participation at best is often symbolic. This is true for India as well. I would just draw your attention to the deplorable number of women CEOs or women in leadership positions in the private sector as well as elected representatives. The current composition of India's upper house, that is Rajya Sabha, has just 25 members of parliament out of 245 members, which is just over 10% of the house, and 75 out of 545 members in the Lok Sabha. So while this is a record high, but in absolute terms, it is just around 13% of the total representation of, which represents 50% of the total population of our country. So to delve into the several dimensions of women's representation in India, we have gathered here today to listen to Dr. Ranjana Kumari, an expert on the subject. The chairperson for the session is Professor Vibhuti Patel, an eminent feminist, economist, and former professor at TIS Mumbai, and is also a professor and head in the Department of Economics at SNDT Women's University in Mumbai. We also have two very young and bright discussants, Dr. Shifalika Shekhar, assistant professor at Bhupen Narayan Mandal University in Madhepura, Bihar. She holds a PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. And earlier, during her student days, she was the vice president of Jawaharlal Nehru Students' Union. We'll also be joined by Ms. Amba Prasad, who is a member of Legislative Assembly in Government of Jharkhand. So with this, I welcome all of you, and Professor Vibhuti Patel, I would request your permission to introduce our speaker for the day.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
So to introduce Dr. Ranjana Kumari, she is a renowned social activist and a prolific academician. She is the director of Center for Social Research, as well as chairperson of Women Power Connect. Dr. Kumari has dedicated her life to empowering women across the South Asia region. She has her MA, MPhil, and PhD in political science from Jawaharlal Nehru University. Her foray into social work was initiated by her concern for a dowry death that took place near her home in 1976. And this led her to activism on the world-famous publication, Brides Are Not for Burning. She has served as the coordinator of the South Asia Network Against Trafficking in Persons and is a member of the Central Advisory Board on Preconception and Prenatal Diagnostic Tests Act 2001. She's also a member of the Central Advisory Committee for the Prevention of Trafficking in Women and Children. And her most of the passionate causes have been to study and to ensure the participation of women in democracy and governance, the termination of dowry practices and dowry-related violence, and also abolition of female feticide. Previously, she has been a member of the Task Force on Industrial Relations for the ILO, International Labour Organization, Geneva, and has worked as a senior professional at the United Nations. Currently, she is a member of the Facebook's Global Safety Advisory Board and is also a member of the Twitter's Trust and Safety Council. And she, as all of you know by now, she's an accomplished academician and has a number of publications to her credit. And some of her major books include Gender Work and Power Relations, A Case Study of Haryana, Women in Politics, Forums and Processes, Reign She Will, Brides Are Not for Burning, and several others. And Dr. Ranjana Kumari combines the two roles of a woman activist and scholar, and with great felicity and panache. She has dedicated her life to significant social causes, and she continues to impact the lives of many with her dedication and zeal. She's a woman. Her voice of she represents the voice of women on various TV channels and has been quoted extensively on print and electronic media. So we are very fortunate, ma'am, to have you this afternoon, and welcome. I now welcome our chair for the session, Professor Vibhuti Patel, to share her opening remarks and invite Dr. Ranjana Kumari thereafter. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Very good afternoon to one and all. I feel really privileged to share the podium with Dr. Ranjana Kumari, a veteran activist who has dedicated more than 4 decades of her life for single-mindedly working for the issue of women's representation. In fact, my first meeting with Dr. Ranjana Kumari was in 1990 when I was asked to organize a roundtable for the Western region dialogue on women in decision making. And after that, I think we have been always a co-traveler in several campaigns together. I greet Dr. Shefali Shekhar, my Samba Prasad, Professor G. Sridevi, and I express my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Simi and Dr. Ritika and Dr. Arjun Kumar for giving me this opportunity to share such a historically significant a special lecture on women's representation. We know that in our country, for nearly 3 decades, from 1964 to 1994, there were so many debates on women's representation, because we were seeing that as compared to like when hundreds of thousands of women took part in the freedom movement. Even in the post-independence period, in the initial period, there were women very active in politics at both national and state level, and also they were active in administration. They were there in the foreign services. We had so many stalwarts, right from Sarojini Naidu. There were 50 women who played very important role in formation of our Constituent Assembly. Even the Speaker for Constituent Assembly was a woman, Mrs. Pushpa Ben Mehta. But we saw that by mid 60s, we saw women's representation in public life was getting reduced. And it is at that time that some of the forward-looking administrators and policymakers started debating. And there was a debate that why should, first of all, those who were very active in freedom movement, they themselves were opposed to women's any kind of affirmative action by the state. They said, okay, we also face so many hurdles in our time. And those days, the gender norms were extremely against women, and still we were active in public life. So why do we need any kind of affirmative action? But the scenario, socio-political scenario has changed, and finally we arrived in 1994, arrived at a consensus that there should be 30% reservation for women in the local self-government bodies. But before that, in 1975, when the United Nations declared International Women's Year, and that was the time also globally the debate on women's representation began, because that was a time where 1 or 2 women were being taken as a decorative pieces in high bodies, but they were not allowed to speak. Anytime they tried to open their mouth, even on women's question, they would be asked to bring sandwiches or coffee. And one day the woman got very wild, and in UN meeting she says, I don't make coffee, I make policy. And I think that was the watershed. Increasingly women started demanding that we are just not there to add color. That's how the cynical man were talking. If you have a one woman in the meeting, it adds color. It is not a question of adding color. It is a question of giving half or representing the needs and demands and aspirations of half of the planet's population. That means women. And after that, we saw 3 approaches which were adopted by various types of women's organizations. That was Women in Development, which demanded affirmative action and abandoning the policy of laissez-faire and leaving everything to market. State had a role for promotion of women's voice. Women in Development approach, which got crystallized because of the efforts of organizations like SEWA and ILABEN and all. They say that we have to have a solidarity, we have to have our own strength, organizational strength. And I think that was the time hundreds of organizations, women's organizations, they were not social work organizations, they were women's rights organizations. They also started voicing their concern. And later, in the end of the Nairobi conference in 1995, when the GAD approach, gender and development approach, was adopted, that was also the time that how to sensitize the existing power structures to make them more responsive to gender needs and women's needs. And the focus was shifted from women to gender. And that was the time women activists felt that maybe the politics of women will get diluted. And it is around this time only the women's rights organization also started a demand. They had a demanding women's reservation in legislature and parliament. At one level, we had adopted the policy of empowerment. India adopted in 2001 women empowerment policy and talked about women's empowerment in all walks of life. But what we saw that women's work participation was declining, women's participation in active political structures at the national level was declining. And our neighboring countries, the SAARC countries, where they had granted affirmative, they had granted reservation for women in the parliament, they had a better record as compared to India. We had so many important documents, right from Shram Shakti report to National Perspective Plan for Women, which also emphasized women's roles as a citizen. But what we saw that, and also the state policy, where the performance of women over last 40 years in the Panchayati Raj institution, urban and local self-government bodies, where these women have faced 3, 4, 5 rounds of elections in Panchayati Raj institutions, and many of them are aspiring to enter into legislative assembly, and they want to also into the parliament. But their wings are cut, and that's why I think we have seen, and Dr. Nanda Kumari is the one who has very doggedly and consistently galvanized women leaders into action, irrespective of their political parties' allegiance, that and they to get the bill passed. But we have more than 15 times the bill has been introduced in the parliament, but except for breaking of furniture and creating ruckus in the parliament, nothing has happened. There were attempts at dividing women on the line of caste, that women from upper caste and English knowing women, they will get the benefit of reservation, and they are not going to represent the needs of uh, uh, a mass of women. No? So that kind of argument was also used. But what we see, that two contradictory things that are happening when it comes to participation in the social movement, tribal movement, Dalit movement, working class movement, women's rights movement, with either a single issue of sex selection or dowry or rape or local livelihood issues. Women are extremely brave. They are fearlessly fighting. They are articulating, and over last, right from 1972 Chipko movement till now, the record of women in a grassroots struggles is extremely high. But when it comes to participating in the electoral politics, I think three major deterrents that we see is fear of character assassination. Any woman who sticks out her neck and she tries to, and if she doesn't have any backing from her family of male politicians or backing of money, she faces tremendous opposition. And one is a character assassination also creates major deterrent among women. Money power, and third one is a muscle power. So I think it is in this context that we see that in the part, as Dr. Simi Mehta also said, that in the current times, in last 5 to 6 years, we have seen tremendous decline of women in not only in politics but also in the industrial scenario. If you see the even after SEBI coming up with a rule of diversity policy of diversity decision making, you hardly see 8 or 9 corporate houses out of Fortune 500 companies who are allowing women to rise. They are recruited, extremely competent, qualified women are recruited, but they are allowed to go only up to junior manager level. If they aspire to come up, then the weapon of sexual harassment is used, as it is shown in several Me Too movement confessions and testimonies provided by women in executive category. And then other thing, that even in the judiciary or administration, governance structures in the state level, so many IAS, IPS, IFS officers, women in the educational institution, they had to use Equal Remuneration Act 1976, which talks about equal an opportunity at the time of recruitment, equal treatment, and equal rewards. But still, we see it is the most violated act. So it is in this context that a veteran like Professor Randa Kumari, who has a both, she's a public intellectual, she's an activist, she has done street fighting, and she's also analyzed the issues. She had exposure at a global level and national level, and she knows the pulse of a situation because of her extensive traveling. I think her insights and her understanding on the issue of women's representation will be extremely useful for further discussion, and also it will give us enough food for thought. Over to Professor Randa Kumari.
Thank you. Thank you. You've made my job much easier, Dr. Vibhuti Patel, as always. You know, as a friend, as a comrade, as someone who has really gone shoulders to shoulder together, we understand each other very well. But at a time in the country, Vibhuti, I cannot but first extend my best wishes and prayers to so many who are suffering, so many who are really getting suffocated because of lack of infrastructure, oxygen facilities. So, you know, my heart goes out to say that what is it that we are lacking? What is it that is going wrong? And I think to some extent in that context also, what I'm going to say today is going to be very relevant. Why we should look up to women to give leadership? Why should women get representation at all? Why should they be also part of making of the democracy and nation building? Well, they are already there. They're already part of this whole process. And they have been all along through freedom movement, post independence, until date, in their own way have been contributing to raising and articulating voices of people. They are working in different fields and farms, so they are also in the productive process. They are in the reproductive process. In spite of lack of reproductive rights, women are there. Whether, you know, there are so many who are dying during childbirth, so much of problem that they are facing, but still women are there. Women are struggling with their resilience. They are able to stand up even during COVID. You see that how much role women Asha and Anganwadi workers as frontline workers and leaders are playing, and how much they have been ignored. And then on the other side, how much pandemic within pandemic has been talked about. Now, this is where we have to really start looking at, where are women leaders? Why are women not leaders? Why are we missing women in leadership positions in our country? When we look around globally, look at the women leaders, whether it's Angela Merkel, whether New Zealand, Taiwan, many countries, we have seen examples that how with full passion, full engagement, they are trying to manage this pandemic. They're trying to manage and trying to save each and every life. There is no power hunger anywhere. They're not running behind, you know, I don't know what is it that, but something we are missing in our country at the moment. And it's hitting me much harder than anything else, because I've just survived COVID and I've just come to talk to you all after just recovering 3 days back. So I feel that this is something where we have to really go deeper down into this whole analysis. And I'm leaving all the numbers and statistics apart because we all know it. We all know Bill is pending for 27 years. We all know there are only 3 ways to go about, creating the gender balance and getting women into power positions. And that is through quota route or through constitutional change. So societies which have struggled for independence, like, whether it is Nepal for democratization of Nepal, or whether it is South Africa, whether any country which has come out of any kind of struggle, have really inbuilt into their constitution that women must get 33% representation. And then there's a story of Scandinavian countries and others where they, from the very beginning, they realized and they gave 50-50, not 40-40 and 20. So 40% seats to women, 40 to men, and 20% as open seats. So there is some arrangement, whether it is the arrangement made by the political party in terms of like what happened in Germany, or whether it in South Africa where it was, and Nepal where it was in the constitution. There has to be some affirmative action that needs to be created to get women there. And on the other side, we have to start preparing the pipeline for getting women into political. As you know, we ran this whole I Will program, Indian Women in Leadership, trained women. And those women today, 1,000 women's compendium, at least I can with some certainty say 750, at least out of those 1,000 women are already in public spaces. They're either mayor or sabhasad, or they're even members of parliament who were trained to this IVIL program with the Institute of Management, Bangalore, which we ran that program. So prepared the pipeline. And then also on the other side, we have to fight the misogyny. The misogyny where men rule the roost. I don't even call it democracy anymore. I call it menocracy. It's menocracy. It's men, power for men, of men, by men, of course, by women. Women contribute for making of this state and nation state. But then the whole power goes in the hands of men, shifts, and they grab it. So almost like 87% seats in India's parliament throughout. We started with 3% on the eve of the independence. We have reached 14% with great difficulty after over 7 decades. And these seats have been by and large reserved for men. So they control the political apparatus. They control the political parties. Seats are not given to women. You can give it to a criminal. So many researchers have come up with how many criminals are in India's parliament. But women's winnability is questioned. So many researches we all have collectively conducted where we prove that women win more in relation to how many seats they get in terms of absolute percentage, but still winnability of a woman is questioned. Money, muscle, mafia, mala, mic, roots, that's what is the scenario at the moment. But anyway, let me get into a little more deeper discussion. Because I feel that peripherally talking about this is not going to really help us understand where the problem is and how we can solve that. So if we say that women constitutes nearly half of the entire population of the country, then maybe perhaps I'm making a little overstatement, because women are a little less than half of the population. So while this statement has to be treated cautiously, as in a multicultural country like India, not all women are same. Yet they are still tied by a common thread of being disadvantaged solely based on their gender, in addition to other social positionings. In a fair world, they would be equal participants in any decision-making and political process. But often this equilibrium is not the natural state of affairs. It is said that women are repository of culture and tradition, and hence social policing is stricter and more rigid for them. So is the systematic disadvantage or curtailment of agency for women. Therefore, there have to be active efforts on parts of different organs of political and civil society to instate a state of equality, wherein equipping women with greater agency, capability, and choices in political spheres. So there has to be conscious effort. It won't happen automatically, given the kind of society we are in. The proponents of democracy have often argued for the superiority of democracy in providing equal opportunities for women and other disadvantages and marginalized groups to voice their concerns and be partners in nation building. As a political scientist, from Plato time to Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau, how the state system grew and how people's, we arrived at democracy as the best system of representation. So everybody will get their share. Nobody will be excluded. That is the promise of the democracy. But what is happening to the marginalized groups? While the argument holds merit, as out of present systems of governance, democracy is in its theoretical foundations, provides the maximum space for all divergent social groups to participate. It does other than any other system. Yet the marriage of theory with reality is not natural. Democracy as a form of modern governance has been hailed as most participatory in nature, but it is often been observed that democracy, if placed in society composed of multiple social cleavages, fail to act as a leveling mechanism on its own. So somebody will have to drive that leveling mechanism. That is why affirmative action. Democracy, just like any other social and political institution, is not fixated in time. Rather, it evolves over time and needs to be actively strengthened and protected against authoritative and hegemonic powers. We've seen it, how democracy in different contexts have really shown that, how concentration of power happens, how people start kind of misusing that power. And we are all experiencing it in different ways in different countries. And countries which have claimed largest democracy, strongest democracy, deepest democracy have gone through these troubles. Democracy, being a political system embedded within social cultural milieu of a society, is heavily swayed by the inherent power relations. An aberrant democratic process can be often underlain by undemocratic procedures. And this is what is our experience. Using the very participatory political space provided by democracy, it needs several enabling factors to allow for full and equal participation of each and every person in the sovereign boundary of a particular democratic country. Democracy and process of democratization are both affected, and in turn affects the process of social and distributive justice and participatory governance. It is essential to understand that a mere right to participate in political process through voting is not the zenith of democracy. And now we have taken voting, just giving right to vote to women, as almost as if this is the zenith. People will vote and this is what their whole participation is. And this is where we have to start questioning the current democratic system itself. Instead, the ability and ease of using free agency based on availability and access to unbiased and free information, as well as ample opportunities and freedom to participate at all levels of political functioning, is strengthened, and then only the democracy will get into a matured form of democracy. So we have a long journey to make, not only for women's participation, but also looking at the next stage of this democratic system. You know, what is it? I mean, what is it that this democracy in the present form is lacking? The discussion till now focused on why democracy is not a perfect system. Now I am questioning this democratic system, Vibhuti. First time I'm writing extensively to look at different aspects of democracy and talking about what is ailing our democracy, why demos, democracy, why demos is not missing from this, and why it is becoming more autocratic, why it is becoming more concentrated, more authoritarian in terms of democratic system. The discussion till now focused on why democracy is not a perfect system, providing equal opportunities. This snippet was vital to establish the context of what is meant by a holistic and mature democracy, and why there is a need for strengthening it. While it is true that 2014 general elections saw the most visual unification of women voters into a unified and politically viable voter group, it was not the first time that women had voted in large numbers. Rather, they have done so in 1984 elections, post-brutal assassination of Indira Gandhi, and voiced their condemnation of violence and brutality in politics. You remember when Rajiv Gandhi, all said that, how, and that's how he won with maximum number of women entered the parliament during that period. The female voter in India has been becoming more politically aware. That's another thing that we have to pay attention to when we are talking about representation of women. They are becoming more politically aware, independent, and increasingly using their free agency, moving out of the shadow of the male members of the family. There was a time when they will say, oh, ghungat pehen ke, they will just go and vote, stamp wherever the man will tell her. This is not the case. Many elections successively is telling us the story. It is the political maturity within female voters that has brought the issue of women to forefront at electoral campaigns and political manifestos. You can see no manifesto is whether they do it or not, but they make all kinds of promise about what they are going to deliver: safety, employment, the girls' hostels, so many things that they have started talking about, the political manifestos about women. The impact has been the increased debate and discussion around the issue of women and child rights also in the manifesto. The prominent example of this electoral maturity and strengthening of women as a uniform group, transcending their internal stratifications, has been the heavy-handed role of women voters in victory of BJP and their prime ministerial candidate in 2014 elections. The election campaign was heavily laden with promises of female safety. As you know, everybody bought in, we all bought in. Security, which was able to attract a large number of women voters. Same has been the case with the winners of the 2019 elections. It repeated the same, the same scenario repeated in 2019. The increased participation of women in democracy as voters and the resulting compulsion for political parties to voice the demand and incorporate women-centric issues points towards the role of women as voters in strengthening of the democracy. Using this increased visual contribution of women as voters as point of departure, it has been often fallaciously argued the role of women in strengthening democracy has been recent. This unification of women as voters is an outcome of long struggle by women at different levels of political and in civil society that facilitates the majority in democracy to enable women voters. I want to get your attention to the other aspect that Vibhuti you talked about, the role of the civil society movement, women's movement. That's what the increased emphasis by feminist scholars and activists to analyze household as a segregated unit composed of complex power relations has enabled to concentrate efforts towards increasing access to power for females within household. Now the political information within household is no longer hegemonic domain of male members, rather it is gradually diffusing. Seeing the role of women in strengthening democracy historically, it is evident that the heightened voice of women as voters is not an initiator, rather it is an outcome of long, strenuous efforts by women actively engaged in political society of India. Role of women in formal politics predates Indian freedom. Women were instrumental in quest for a universal adult franchise in India. Women's groups united and voiced against the separate electorate at that time during the freedom movement based on religion in pre-independent India. You mentioned about the speaker and mentioned about other women who really were totally firm on not giving in at that point of time. They actively opposed it as it would hinder women from participating in active politics by putting them at disadvantaged footing in comparison to their male counterparts. The active engagement of women in formal politics continued post-independence, when women fought for modifications in Hindu Code Bill and asserted for their rights on property. This led to wide divisions and disputes in Lok Sabha following independence. Time and again, women parliamentarians have brought to forth and fought for women-centric issues. Mind you, when we did the content analysis of parliament proceedings, you will be surprised to know, not so surprised to know, but people who are listening to me, that majority of the women spoke about women-only issues. It is of late that women were given to talk on budget by their own political parties. The misogynist in the political party did not even allow women to talk about non-women, because time is allocated by the political parties to speak in the parliament. So we can't even blame our women parliamentarians because they never got the time to speak about other issues other than women. And they were the only ones who were concerned about women's issues that arose, even including this women reservation bill. As you know, Dr. Patel, that this was brought in by Mrs. Pramila Dandavate as a private member bill. And after that only that the committee was constituted in the chairpersonship of Geeta Mukherjee, so many other parliamentarians were members. They went across the country and then the bill was formulated and presented. And it's been 3 decades since we are waiting for that bill. Longest pending bill in India's parliament. So let me continue. Okay, time and again, women parliamentarians have brought forth and fought for women-centric issues. One cannot undermine the role of Geeta Mukherjee. 1 second, I'm just almost there. So just bear with me because normally I'm very extempore speaker, but at the moment in my mind, COVID ruling the roost. Okay, Mukherjee and Pramila Dandavate in their struggle for 108th constitutional amendment of women reservation bill, it has to be admitted that often, despite several women parliamentarians fighting for the cause of women in formal politics, they have often been unable to usher in legislative reforms on their own. This is widely due to the active fencing of politics from women. So what I'm calling it is not really not giving them a representation. There is active fencing so that they can't enter politics. And who does this fencing? The patriarchal, misogynistic mindset. The menocracy is doing the fencing so women cannot enter the political spaces on their own will and choices. And, fearing them, character assassination, these are all, I don't consider them to be very important issues because this is what, they will tell you, we will protect you. That's the whole discourse. We will protect you, don't go out. because you will be violated. Who will violate you? It is we who will violate you. It's men who will violate you, and men will protect you. So don't go out. You know, we will character assassinate you. Don't enter politics. Don't be. So we fence. That's the fence that is put around women. Okay. This is widely due to active fencing of politics from women, resulting in minuscule number of women as parliamentarians, who often on their own are unable to get the desired legislative outcomes. Yet, these women of national prominence act as symbols of female strength and power, and act as strong role models for women of the country, motivating them to increase their participation in democratic process. On domain of the formal policy, that has recently seen surge in active and effective participation of women. Women are demanding power because Panchayati Raj and local body institution has thrown up so much of women leadership. A mayor of a city is capable of contesting for parliament, but she never gets that seat. You know, after all, she is managing a whole city with large budget, but then still she's not considered to be competent. That's another thing about patriarchy, that they will consider you less. Always a woman is less than a man in terms of intellectual capacity, in terms of her physical capacity, in terms of her, mental strength. And that is where you are put down all the time by this ideological positioning, that patriarchy puts you down, underassesses you, and does not allow you to move up, and fences you within your own space. So, but Panchayati Raj institution, of course, there are so many women who have come because of reservation. Within these institutions, when present in substantial numbers, women gain sufficient power to alter the political landscape. It has often been seen in various researches that women local body legislatures have worked more for welfare schemes, apart from their role in provision and increasing access to welfare schemes. These local leaders act as strong magnets for women to increase their participation in democracy and pave way for democratic institutions that are placed at more equalizing footing, smoothing the multiple slivers of divisions within Indian society. Engagement of women in strengthening the democratic space of the nation is not limited to voters or formal politicians, but is composed in large proportion of women's movement organizations. So for me, the hope is in the other side. Whereas in politics, we have to enter, we have to take our positions of power. But the other side, women are already playing a very, very effective, active, formidable role of leadership. These organizations have been dominant, mobilizing vehicles of women in democracy. The women's rights organizations operate in distinct ways. The two dominant streams have been active political engagement and capacity building. The former has been instrumental in ushering in constitutional and legislative amendments by acting as a strong pressure group, often acting as a bridge between political echelons of common women. Given the nature of Indian democracy emanating from the nature of its freedom struggle, civil society often overlaps with political society in India. Pay attention to this, because I think people are not, at the moment, civil society is getting undermined. But let me tell you, they are the ones who fill the gap between people and the people sitting in power positions. The governments and the people, they are the real people who link and become the bridge between the two. Very often, the women legislators who have been most vocal for female-centric laws have been part of the wider women's organizations and civil society, whether it is in state assemblies or in parliament. The ones who speak, they have the women's perspective, women's consciousness. These organizations have been consequential in formation of laws such as anti-dowry laws, constitutional provision providing Hindu women rights to ancestral property, laws against domestic violence, sexual abuse, and so many, etc., etc. The other wing of the women movement, though working in distance with the active politics, has been the vital importance in preparing a functioning and capable base of women to enter, engage effectively in democratic process. These organizations have been working for years in providing training to elected women legislators, provisions of education and other life chance opportunities, as well as monitoring implementation of the law, safeguarding rights of women, and ensuring gender justice. So that's the other side of the story. These organizations have been instrumental in provision of skills necessary for strengthening democracy through informed agency at grassroots. So training Panchayati Raj women leaders at grassroots, building their leadership, making them better informed to be able to perform better. It is evident that involvement and role of women in strengthening of democracy has been unidirectional. Rather, it has been diverse. It has not been unidirectional, sorry. It has not been unidirectional, but rather it has been diverse, impacting all possible facets of democratic life. Women in their various capacities have utilized the opportunities provided by a democratic system and have engaged actively in directing the nascent democratic institutions towards maturing of India's democracy. Yet, there remain several gaps and gap areas that need to be filled in order to create conducive conditions enabling women to harness their full democratic potentials and further strengthen Indian democracy. The number of women in parliament and state legislative assemblies are dismal. You all have talked about it. Though the number is rising, but the pace is highly disappointing. And it is further questionable that how many women, perhaps 100 years, I don't know when we are going to fulfill our dream of, at least in one lifetime, I want to see something happen. 40 years of my life has gone in this. So I want to see something change, women getting into the power. Though this number is rising, but unfortunately not enough. In past few years, the involvement of women parliamentarians raising and fighting for women's rights issues is also dismal. As you said, numbers are going down. Also, women are being succumbed to. Women have been becoming ornamental presence in politics. I always say that because their political future depends on these male politicians who control the parties. So they are also not able to really join, whether it was Nirbhaya, whether it was, whatever happens when we raise our voices, entry into the temple. There were so many issues in the past we have fought for, female, gender-based sex selection, so many. But have you ever seen a very strong, formidable voice coming from the parliament by women parliamentarians? No, because they are fearing it. They are just fearing it. They have been put there in positions of power without any power. And then everybody says, oh, look at her, she can't manage the finance, look at her, she can't manage women and child, look at her, she can't manage this, that. Push them wherever you want to. You pick them from one place to the other. It's almost like an ornament, that you need some kind of a presence, and that's why women are present in these positions of power. I will not say these are very formidable women. They have worked very hard. Every single woman I respect who's been able to survive misogyny and male political framework. So for me, all these women matter. They are very respected, but powerless. That's the crux of the whole thing. This cannot be solved until there is substantial number of women. So this is my last paragraph. Please, substantial number of women in parliament, like in local body institutions, providing enough voice to women to sway decisions favoring gender equality in heavily male-dominated parliament and state assemblies. So numbers.
Got stuck.
I think there's some problem with the connection. You can hold for a minute. Maybe Miss Ma'am is joining.
I will try to get in touch.
Yeah, okay.
Dr. Ranjana is really making some very interesting remarks. Very, very enlightening. I hope all of you would be agreeing to it.
Yeah.
And very passionate. I'm sure that is why the work that she does, and for the past 4 decades, it has been so wonderful.
I think the most important thing here is that first, the last point which she was making, that unless you are a critical minimum, because all the theories of political science are also talking that, and that we have also experienced, like women's quota within the electoral bodies, if they are in one or two, they can be cowed down, they can be silenced, they don't have agenda setting power. But when they are 25%, 33%, as we have seen in the SAARC countries, whether it is in Nepal or Sri Lanka or Bangladesh, where they are in number, same thing in the European Parliament, no? 40% women in European Parliament. If they go in a group and they work together, then they get agenda setting power. And it also changes the culture. The work culture within the parliament also changes. Earlier, all the decisions in European Parliament were taken by old boys in a pub after the parliamentary hours. The moment 40% women joined the parliament, then the whole culture said that they wanted the business to be finished between 9 and 5. So I think it was
Okay, can I just conclude, Vibhuti?
Yes,
Sorry,
ma'am.
my
Yes,
Ma'am,
my
your
Zoom
last,
dropped.
your last.
Your last
Zoom
point.
is in a mess.
Yeah, we
My
were
last point. My
we were
last
filling in the
point.
gap. We were filling in the gap.
Thank you,
Enough.
thank you. My whole thing, the Zoom drop doesn't matter. Technology and India, we are still not there. So, okay. So now I just want to conclude. I just want to, because it's been a little rather long discussion, and I am writing. I will be soon completing this and then putting it out for all of you to see and comment. But I think that, there is enough voice to women to sway decisions favoring gender equality is heavily male dominated parliament and assembly. So what is really important? It is of utter importance that sufficient affirmative action is provided in form of constitutional reforms, enabling women to engage in legislative processes and have greater voice in the active nation building. This is vital to direct the politically charged women of the nation into to become active participants of policy formulation, shaping and strengthening of democracy and process of democratization. Now, why I'm concluding and I'm saying this is because if this democracy and this form of democracy has to survive, and if it has to become stronger, and if this democratic system is going to be really delivering the promises made, then women have to become equal participant. Otherwise, this democracy is neither tenable nor sustainable, nor this democracy will survive for long. We can see the kind of tensions that we have seen, and we are seeing it already globally. And also I call for an open discussion on the whole current form of democratic institution. As a political scientist, as a women activist, as a gender rights worker, I want an open discussion about how long, when, why, all these needs to be answered. Women have to become equal participant in making, building, and of course, living this democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ranjana Kumari. It was just wonderful listening to you and your excellent insights. So without wasting any time, I think we can go to our chair. Ma'am, would you like to invite Dr. Shefalika first?
Yeah. Dr. Shefalika, now you can respond to Ranjana Kumari.
हेलो, नमस्कार। आवाज आ रही है हमारी?
हाँ
जी। नमस्कार रंजना मैम और विभूति मैम को भी नमस्कार। सिमी, आपको शुक्रिया मुझे बुलाने के लिए। रंजना मैम को तो हम लोग बहुत दिनों से सुनते आ रहे हैं, बहुत पढ़ा है इनको, और जेएनयू के दिनों से हम इनको कई बार मैम से सुना है, इनको मुलाकात हुई है कई बार। विभूति मैम से कभी मुलाकात नहीं हुई, लेकिन मैम को भी हमने सुना हुआ है। रंजना मैम ने कई सारे फैक्ट हमारे सामने रखे, उन्होंने अपने एक्सपीरियंस हमारे सामने रखे। मुझे लगता है कि जब हम वुमेन रिप्रेजेंटेशन की बात करते हैं तो बहुत सारी चीजें हैं। पॉलिटिक्स पर मैम ने लंबी बातचीत की। पॉलिटिक्स के अलावा मुझे लगता है कि बहुत सारी ऐसी चीजें हैं जो कि चीजों को अलग दिशा में लेकर के जाती है कि क्यों पॉलिटिक्स में महिलाओं की भागीदारी क्यों नहीं बढ़ पा रही है, और यदि है भी तो वो किस रूप में है। राजनीति के अलावा हमें देखनी चाहिए कि शिक्षा में महिलाओं की क्या भागीदारी है, और वहीं से हम देख पाएंगे कि जो राजनीति है, राजनीति में महिलाओं की भागीदारी क्यों नहीं हो पा रही है। हम यदि जेएनयू का एक डाटा ले, और जेएनयू में पहले जिस तरीके से होता था कि जो महिलाएं हैं और जो पिछड़ी इलाके की महिलाएं हैं, उनके लिए अलग से 5 पॉइंट दिया जाता था। जो महिला है उनको तो दिया ही जाता था, जो पिछड़ी समाज की महिला है या पिछड़े भौगोलिक रूप से जो पिछड़ा जिला है उनको दिया जाता था। इस तरीके का यदि प्रावधान हर शैक्षणिक संस्थानों में हो तो महिलाओं की भागीदारी निश्चित तौर पर, हम यदि देखेंगे कि उच्च शिक्षा से लेके तमाम सारी जगहों पर महिलाओं की भागीदारी बढ़ सकती है, और हम इसको महिलाओं को हर क्षेत्र में हम देख सकते हैं, ये मुकम्मल रूप में महिलाओं की भागीदारी हो सकती है। महिलाओं की जब हम राजनीति के रूप में देखते हैं कि राजनीतिक में महिलाओं की भागीदारी क्यों नहीं हो रही है, ये देखिए कि 96 में वुमेन रिजर्वेशन बिल पेश किया गया था, और तब से देखिए कि 25 साल का समय हमने या हमारे राजनेताओं ने और हमारे संसद ने ले लिया, लेकिन अभी तक उस पर कोई हमारे हाथ में कोई ऐसा चीज नहीं है कि जिससे हम कह सकते हैं कि 33% वुमेन रिजर्वेशन हमें मिल रहा है, हमें नहीं मिल रहा है। हमने देखा कि 2012 में राज्यसभा में तो वो पास हो गया, लेकिन राज्यसभा के बाद क्या, राज्यसभा के बाद उस समय कांग्रेस की सरकार थी और कांग्रेस ने कहा कि मेजोरिटी का प्रॉब्लम है, बहस हो रही है। लेकिन उसके बाद हमने देखा कि एक बहुत सुंदर फोटो आता है जिसमें एक तरफ सोनिया गांधी है, एक तरफ सुषमा स्वराज है, बहुत लोगों को ये फोटो याद होगा, और बृंदा करात है। तीनों अलग अलग, बिल्कुल अलग धाराओं के लोग हैं और सब गुलाल लगाए हुए हैं सबके मुंह पे, चेहरे पे। सुषमा जी तो अब नहीं रही, तो हमें लगा, एक उम्मीद थी कि चलिए अब हो सकता है कि वुमेन रिजर्वेशन बिल पास हो।
हम सब लोग उस दिन पार्लियामेंट की गैलरी में बैठे हुए थे, हम
अच्छा।
सब लोग, मैं स्वयं वहां थी और हम सब लोग वहां से बाहर निकले थे, पूरा मीडिया हमारे पीछे दौड़ रहा था। इतनी खुशी थी उस दिन हम लोगों को, इतनी खुशी।
हर एक न्यूज़पेपर में, हर एक उस समय की जो भी पत्रिकाएं थी, सारे पत्रिकाओं में ये फोटो फ्रंट पर था, तो हमें एक होप लगा, एक उम्मीद जगी कि चलिए 3 अलग अलग धाराओं की महिलाएं यहाँ पर हैं और कुछ हो सकता है। लेकिन अभी तक हमें कुछ नहीं दिख रहा है कि कुछ कॉन्क्रीट हमारे सामने हो कि रिजर्वेशन आ गया हो। और अब देखिए कि अब भी जब मेजोरिटी है सरकार की, तब भी हमें कुछ नहीं दिख रहा है कि वुमेन रिजर्वेशन, उस पर कोई सवाल करने के लिए तैयार नहीं। अभी तक कोई इस पर सवाल नहीं हो रहा है, कोई मुद्दा नहीं उठ रहा है कि वुमेन रिजर्वेशन बिल होना चाहिए और महिलाओं की भागीदारी।
The video has gotten stuck, so no issues. I think we'll continue.
बहुत ज्यादा पढ़ी लिखी नहीं है, उनका क्या होगा? उनको लेकर के तो मेरा रंजना मैम से और विभूति मैम से भी ये सवाल है कि कोटा विद इन कोटा जो वुमेन रिजर्वेशन बिल को लेकर के बहुत पुराना ये बहस रहा है, जब देवगौड़ा जी की सरकार थी तब भी ये बहस आई थी, तो उस पर भी कोई बात नहीं है। और उसको यदि छोड़ भी दे तत्काल, कि फिलहाल यदि हम उसको छोड़ दें, मगर 33% रिजर्वेशन तो हमें अभी भी नहीं मिल रहा है, उसमें कोई किसी तरीके की कोई बातचीत नहीं हो रही है, तो इसलिए भी महिलाओं की भागीदारी नहीं हो रही है। दूसरा जो मैम ने कहा कि पितृसत्ता, ये बहुत सही बात है, बहुत वाजिब बात है, और 4 जो लोग अभी हम लोग बैठे हुए हैं, डिस्कशन कर रहे हैं, जब तक पितृसत्ता से मुक्त नहीं होगा हमारा समाज, हम चाहे वो शिक्षा का क्षेत्र हो, चाहे वो कला का क्षेत्र हो, चाहे वो राजनीति का क्षेत्र हो, चाहे वो कोई भी क्षेत्र हो, किचन के अलावा हमारी भागीदारी, महिलाओं की भागीदारी कहीं नहीं संभव है। और ये मुझे लगता है कि जब तक हम समाज में महिलाओं को लेकर के, जिसमें महिलाएं लीड करें जिस आंदोलन को, जब तक महिलाएं आंदोलन के लिए सामने नहीं आएंगी, जब तक महिलाएं ग्रास रूट भूमि पर, मतलब जमीन पर आकर के, जो ग्रामीण इलाके हैं जहां एक्चुअली में जहां मांस है, जहां लोग हैं, जहां ग्रामीण महिलाएं हैं, उनको जब तक आंदोलित ना किया जाए, उनको जब तक उनका अधिकार, उनके हक को के बारे में ना बताया जाए, उनको जागृत ना किया जाए, तो मुझे नहीं लगता है कि बहुत ज्यादा फर्क पड़ सकता है। क्योंकि लोगों को जानकारी तो है, लेकिन लोग डरते हैं। जैसे मैम ने भी कहा कि जो संसद में लोग हैं, दे वांट टू क्वेश्चन। वो ऐसा नहीं है कि वो महिलाओं के जो मुद्दे हैं उस पर बातचीत नहीं करना चाहते हैं, लेकिन बातचीत कैसे करें, उनके ऊपर बहुत सारा प्रेशर है कि आप ये सवाल करेंगी, आप ये सवाल नहीं करेंगे। उन्हें मौका ही नहीं दिया जाता है कि वो महिलाओं के सवाल को सामने लेकर के आए। तो महिलाओं की भागीदारी तब तक नहीं हो सकती है जब तक महिला, मुझे लगता है कि शिक्षा इसका बहुत बड़ा, शिक्षा से इसका कनेक्शन है कि जब तक महिलाएं शिक्षित नहीं होंगी, माध्यमिक स्तर पर, हायर एजुकेशन के स्तर पर, नौकरियों के स्तर पर, जब तक आर्थिक रूप से महिलाएं सबल नहीं होंगी, मुझे नहीं लगता है कि महिलाओं की भागीदारी किसी भी क्षेत्र में बहुत ज्यादा संभव है। तो मेरा मैम से सवाल है कि मैम अभी भी क्यों नहीं आरक्षण को लेकर के कुछ कॉन्क्रीट हम कर पा रहे हैं? क्यों नहीं हम लोगों को आंदोलित कर पा रहे हैं, या जो लोग सत्ता में बैठे हुए हैं, चाहे वो भाजपा की सरकार अभी मेजोरिटी में है, मगर कुछ कॉन्क्रीट हमारे सामने नहीं दिख रहा है। तो एक बहुत बड़ा सवाल है कि ऐसा क्यों नहीं हो रहा है। हम आर्टिकल खूब लिखते हैं, हम बातचीत करते हैं, लेकिन मुझे लगता है कि इस बातचीत को जो एक ग्रामीण क्षेत्र के लोग हैं, जहाँ ज्यादातर जनताएं जहाँ रहती हैं, वहाँ के लोगों को इस बात से कनेक्ट करने की जरूरत है। तभी मुझे लगता है कि हम कुछ कॉन्क्रीट कर पाएंगे और इस दिशा में कुछ हो सकता है। मैं चाहूंगी कि रंजना मैम इस पर अपनी कुछ प्रतिक्रिया दे, तब मैं कुछ बात करूं।
Thank you, Shifalika ma'am. Thank you, Ranjana ma'am. We also have another discussant, Professor G. Sridevi from Hyderabad Central University, and so after her remarks, maybe you can combine your response. So thank you, Shifalika ma'am. I would now invite Professor G. Sridevi to make her comments. Sridevi ma'am, can you hear me? Sridevi ma'am.
Simi, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am. Go on.
Okay. Video on कर सकते हैं तो?
नहीं, मैम हॉस्पिटल में.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Thank you so much for an excellent presentation. I thank Simi and Dr. Arjun for giving me this opportunity. We all know that Indian society is characterized by caste, which is a well-knitted network with the endogamous marriage system and enforced through social sanctions, imposing graded inequality between various castes in the system of caste emerging out of the Hindu social framework. And caste exists as a reality, and it continues to exist as a dominant characteristics either in the social, economic, and the political life of any individual. So scheduled caste women who were ordinated to be at the bottom of India's caste and gender hierarchies remain the most vulnerable in the social, political, and economic sphere. So in that context, when we are talking about any kind of the access to the resources or access to the political power, most of the time vulnerable groups, women are abused and treated very badly in the social order. So the sexual violence against the Dalit women often gets initiated as a punitive action against the Dalit communities, when the downtrodden communities exercise assertion, demanding what is right and just, with a set of coercive curbs executed by the dominant caste in the form of banning from the work, and as well as banning them to have the access to the common resources or access to the basically in the village structure, water and other aspects. So even when we look into the existing studies on women and various access to the resources, especially in terms of land rights, it is very clear that high level agreement exists in the academic literature that there exists a positive association of the women's land rights on empowerment and improved bargaining power, maybe politically as well as economically also in the village structure. The Constitution of India has embarked upon the process of democratization. Caste-based sources of authority constantly undermine constitutional authority, which is quite evident by how dominant caste of the villages still control the panchayats in rural communities, despite being headed by the Dalit, especially when it is the Dalit women through the reservation. And we have seen many live examples where these Dalit women, when they become the panchayat presidents, were not allowed to sit in the chairs. There are examples from Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and various places, and they were not supposed to be wearing good saris or whatever it may be. So again, it is a dependence factor that influences part of the domination, as a dominant caste continuously possesses the disproportionate control over the assets. It may be land and other kind of the assets. So women isolation from politics does not only render them subordinate to men, it has also contributed to the persistence of the blatant gender bias in the development policies. So there is all these kinds of social discrimination actually leading to the kind of a discrimination in terms of access to the resources, in terms of land, or it may be in the form of access to the education and other kind of the resources. And in turn, their role as a political leaders. Why only we see very few leaders, like if we consider from the Dalit community, it was Mayawati, who was very powerful. I mean, women have played an effectively certain leadership roles at national level, in various forms, in the social form also, like Mother Teresa and Mayawati and Mrs. Indira Gandhi. But why we are not able to promote the consciousness of the equality within the gender? Because different women coming from the different caste groups are treated differently within the village space. Is it because of the prejudice, glass ceiling, or feedback effects? Where do we fail? This is applicable to the workplace also. In workplace also, very systematic discrimination takes place. That may be individual or the institutional discrimination most of the times. And there are greater hindrances in their career advancements and having the skill development, or there exists a huge knowledge gap because of these inequalities. And the range of challenges for women and the female children echoes across the Asia, and in India it is more promptly seen in terms of access to education, and now the most importantly, the level of the malnutrition and anemia among the children and the women. Is it because of the set of the underlying social, economic, and the political barriers which are limiting opportunities for the women, which we are not able to question it in an appropriate way? Where do we fail in bringing the equality within the various caste groups of the women? and the most important problem women in Indian politics face is that even if reservations are made for women in general and women coming from the particular social categories, they are not included in the party politics as an important role players, or they're not involved in the decision making also. Why the women are not involved in the decision making? That question actually comes from the household level itself, the resource controlling and then decision making power at the household level, domestic violence. We see at various levels the unequal treatment. So I shall be happy if Professor Ranjan Kumari can focus on something on the existing discrimination within the same gender. Like if I get into the major question is, how do you treat the third gender also? Even can they have access politically? Do people accept it? So if you can reflect on these issues, I shall be thankful. Thank you.
Thank you, Sridevi ma'am, for raising very pertinent points. Thank you. And in fact, I would also like to add a couple of points about political empowerment, which Shifalika ma'am was talking about, which is deteriorating every passing year, I think. Very recently, the World Economic Forum's Gender Gap report, it pointed out that India is 140th out of 156 countries and far below all our South Asian neighbors who have reservation, 50% reservation for women in their countries. So a major chunk of this deteriorated rank is because we are not performing well in political empowerment. So it is a wake-up call, and I'm quite surprised that why we have not heard anything on this from the government circles, from the policy corridors. It is quite surprising. And also about catcalling, there is a comment by Mr. Rakesh. It is certainly very demotivating, and catcalling, and even one of our members of parliament had said that if we have a reservation for women in the parliament, then it will be a kitty party, and people will be whistling and all those things. Very, ma'am, aap mute mein hai. Were you saying something?
Manika, at least it will not be a gunda party.
That's right. I think we should have responded to that in that manner. So ye it is simply, I think, possessing a superiority complex just because of the virtue that you are a man. That is why you are entitled to speak all this language, and nothing else. It just shows a sheer abhorrence to the values, to dignity, to respect, and even morals. So I think we are missing on those front from our male politicians, and it is a wake-up call for even the male politicians to come to the forefront to support and to join the cause for calling for greater empowerment in the policy spaces. So that's what I wanted to share. And ma'am, would you like to take these comments and respond to them?
Well, I think I agree with Sridevi's analysis that the bottom of the bottommost people in our society have never been included, and bottomest is the Dalit women. So I think the last line, and that's where it has never reached, even in the women's movement. But then there is Dalit right women's movement. The women are not quiet from the Dalit community. They are also, there is a great assertion going on from there. We all support, we coordinate, participate with each other, and unless they are brought into the forefront. But let's move to the political arena. When Panchayati Raj arrangement has been made for 50% reservation, and most of the states have that, then there are panchayats which are which have panchayat pradhans as Dalit women. In the first round, I totally agree with you that they were not even allowed. There was an incident in Handra where a Dalit Panchayati Raj leader was even burned to death. But now you should visit, and so many studies from different university campuses have emerged where women have become stronger, their voices, they are able to articulate, they are able to provide the leadership. So it took time, it takes time. Societies don't change just by a stroke of pen, by changing, but when you make that stroke of pen, then it provides the condition in which then people start to change. So I would say that the way Panchayati Raj institutions are building women's leadership of Dalit women, minority women, women of different caste backgrounds, I think the problem at different level is of different kind, and that's why I'm saying that Indian women are not a homogeneous group. Just by saying women, you're not talking about all women. And as you know, the latest analysis framework, intersectionality framework, is something which represents all these issues as you're talking about. I would encourage you to read a lot of literature about Black women's Black person's life matters, about Dalit women's rights, about Dalits' rights in India, tribal rights in India. So much is, so the society is really churning, society is really moving, leadership is coming up and things. But the biggest thing is that as long as the power remains in the hands of patriarchy and men, as one of our commentators said, that's the first battle to be won. Look, there is a quota for Dalit in parliament, and you cannot pass any bill, any legislation can't make this mandatory by the parliament, by the Constitution of India, to give that provision. But how many Dalit women get elected? How many of them really get an opportunity in that, under that quota also? So it's a wheel within the wheel that we have to, or circle within the circle that we have to cross, and it's a long battle. Someday we will have a bigger discussion on that. And also to answer your question that why it is, क्यों नहीं इसके बारे में बात होती है गांव, विभूति से पूछिए, देश का कोई गांव नहीं है जहां मैं नहीं जाती हूँ, जहां मैं नहीं गई हूँ पिछले 40 साल में। पूछिए सबसे जानकारी लीजिए कि हम लोगों ने कितने संघर्ष किए, कितनी मीटिंगें की, कितनी रैलियां निकाली, कितने धरने दिए, कितनी बार पुलिस ने हमें पीटा, खींच के थाने में बंद किया, कितनी बार। आप सब लोग नए हैं, यंग हैं, आपको मालूम नहीं है कि 30 साल से कितना संघर्ष औरतों ने सड़कों पे किया। रिले हंगर स्ट्राइक की हम लोगों ने, पार्लियामेंट में जाके बैठे हम लोग, वहां घुसे काली काली साड़ी पहन करके, और सबने कहा ये ब्लैक डे है इंडियन पार्लियामेंट का। गांधी जी की मूर्ति के सामने हम पार्लियामेंट में जाके बैठे, पार्लियामेंट स्ट्रीट पे घसीटे गए हम लोग सड़कों के ऊपर, हम लोग को थाने में पुलिस ने बंद करके मारा, औरतों को मारा पुलिस ने थाने में। ये राज खाली बीजेपी के समय में नहीं हुआ और किसके समय में नहीं हुआ, सबने किया हम लोग के साथ। तो संघर्ष बड़ा लंबा है, और इस संघर्ष का आप इतिहास समझने की कोशिश करिए। ये नहीं कि गांव की औरतों को नहीं जोड़ा गया है, लेकिन ये जरूर है कि इनके कानों में जू नहीं रेंग रही है, इनको नहीं समझ में आ रहा है कि औरतों। आप देखिए कितनी बार, कितने मैनिफेस्टो, तो आपको मालूम नहीं, अर्जुन सिंह जी अब नहीं रहे, उनके चेयरपर्सन थे कांग्रेस के मैनिफेस्टो कमेटी के। मैं स्वयं जाके प्रेजेंटेशन करके आई थी अपनी पूरी महिलाओं की टीम को लेकर के। हम लोग हर पार्टी के हर चुनाव के पहले, हर मैनिफेस्टो के बनने के पहले हमने विमेन मैनिफेस्टो निकाला है। आप सारा डॉक्यूमेंटेशन कहीं ना कहीं नेहरू मेमोरियल म्यूजियम लाइब्रेरी में मिल जाएगा, आपको पढ़िए कितना मेहनत का काम हुआ है औरतों की तरफ से। जबकि 20 औरतों को जुटाना मुश्किल है, हम लोग हजारों औरतें सड़कों पर आए हैं। लेकिन ये इतना आसान नहीं है ये संघर्ष। गांव की औरतों को भी जुड़ना है, शहर की औरतों को भी जुड़ना है, सबको मिलजुल करके इस लड़ाई को लड़ना है। और जो लोग, देखिए सत्ता आसानी से, ये तो आखिरी बेशन ऑफ मेल पावर है ना। Political power is the last bastion of patriarchy. You have to smash it. Now you have to muster the courage. Your generation of women will have to come forward. We have done our job. Previous generation has done their job. You all guys have to come out and start demanding it, asking for it, and be ready to sacrifice for this struggle. Be ready to sacrifice. We could have been anything in life. We could have gone anywhere, to any level. But no, we are fighting for women's equality, gender rights. We are fighting for women's real equal position in Indian society. तो ये नहीं कि मतलब ये हुआ नहीं है, बहुत 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 संघर्ष, और खाली हम लोगों ने नहीं किया, पूरे देश में महिलाओं ने किया। जब महाराष्ट्र में हुआ है, आप देखिए कितने राजसत्ता आंदोलन, दुनिया में नाम नहीं लेना चाहती हूँ, हजारों संगठन, WPC के 1900 संगठन मेंबर बने थे। विमेन पावर कनेक्ट का जो हमने ढांचा बनाया, विभूति जी भी उसकी अध्यक्ष रही, मैं भी उसकी अध्यक्ष रही, हम लोगों ने पूरे देश में मोबिलाइजेशन किया है। लेकिन ये आसान काम नहीं है। सत्ता पुरुषों के हाथ से परिवार में नहीं ले पा रहे हैं। सत्ता, संतति और संपत्ति का ही तो खेल है सारा ये। सत्ता उनके पास है, संपत्ति उनके पास है, और संतति पे भी उन्हीं का हक होता है, पैदा हम करते हैं। ठीक है ना, यही तो सारी लड़ाई है हमारी। और इसको लड़ना, ये नहीं कि हम लोग कोई गिव अप करने वाले लोगों में से हैं। हम लोग लड़ेंगे और जीतेंगे। ये हमने हमेशा से नारा दिया है कि हम लोग लड़ेंगे और हम लोग जीतेंगे। ठीक है, और बहुत लंबा मैं नहीं बोलूंगी क्योंकि मुझे थोड़ा सा वो ड्राइनेस हो रही है, और वो 2-3-4 दिन से लंबा बुखार रहा है, तो काफी दिन चला, तो इसलिए थोड़ा सा अब हम लोग ब्रेक ले लें इससे, तो अच्छा रहेगा। अगर आप लोग चाहें विभूति जी कुछ बोले तो इस समय ज्यादा अच्छा रहेगा।
Thank you, ma'am. Salute to your struggles. और yes, विभूति मैम, over to you.
तो जो गंगा जी ने कहा वही बात को जोड़ के कि भाई हमने भी 1975 से लेके आज तक महिलाओं की का जो सामूहिक संघर्ष रहा है वो तो बहुत ही ज्वलंत रहा है। लेकिन हमें नहीं भूलना चाहिए कि 5000 साल की पितृसत्ताक मूल्य व्यवस्था जिसमें संपत्ति, संतति और सत्ता पुरुषों के हाथ में रही है, उसके सामने लड़ाई करना एक बहुत ही बड़ा मुहिम जो जिसका बीड़ा women's rights movement, the current women's rights movement they had taken up. I would like to say that recently, in the context of COVID-19, we must understand that out of 204 countries, only 25 countries responded to coronavirus pandemic in a most proactive way. They put people before profit. And out of these 25 countries, 18 countries had women head of the states. And that's why globally the public opinion, the way like in 1975, it was Esther Bossel's book, Women's Contribution in the Economy, which had a ripple effect. Currently, the major debate that is going on in the international women's movement, international human rights movement, that let us not talk about women in development. बहनों को विकास से जोड़ने की बात मत करो, women led development, because women are more humane, वो मानवता पे ज्यादा ध्यान देती है. And there are so many alternate manifestos that what kind of post-COVID society we want to create, which is inclusive, which respects diversity, which puts people before profit. So that kind of thinkings have also started happening. And I think it's very important to dream. Once we dream, then only we get galvanized into action to achieve that dream. So I think that is very important. So the question of capacity building, when we talk about the NIRD and UNDP study, NIRD study, it's an all India study on performance analysis of women elected representatives in Panchayati Raj institution, which state that it was done in 2002. That also accepted that these women elected representatives were excellent, efficient, effective in terms of practical gender needs, bijli, nal, pani, immediate needs of the people in the community, in the constituency, they were extremely effective. But when it came to strategic gender needs, which challenges the patriarchy, and as Dr. Ranna Kumari said, that is the time where the fencing of she said that the active fencing by the misogynist mindset comes into play. And that's why I think that is a very, very, for which we all will have to get united. That's very important. Another thing is that global experiences of affirmative action, and now I think the global pressure exerted by World Economic Forum and also the International Women's Movement, transnational feminism, that is also bringing the question of women's representation center stage. And we need to keep the public debate on, because not only in our country, but today's newspaper, you must have seen what happened to these 3 parliamentarians who were representing European Parliament to Turkey. It's such a stupid, it's a very, very childish way of humiliating a woman who is representing the head. Only 2 chairs they kept in such a big, extremely spacious room with lot of artifacts and all. And there were 2 flags of Turkey and European Union. And then there are only 2, so 2 male representatives were, there were chairs for them. Just to humiliate this woman representative, they did that. So I think that and the ripple effect is very important, because if we keep silence, you may say that, okay, what is so this thing? They will bring some plastic chair and she'll sit. That is not the question. Question is this kind of a symbolism, this kind of behavior in a public life that cannot be condoned under any circumstances. And I'm so happy that millions of Twitters have condemned this act. So I think
Yes.
we also need to understand, just don't, this kind of trivialization of women in public life we should not allow under any circumstances. So let us begin if we are citizens, then let us use our right as a citizen to see to it that wherever we are, whether we are in educational institution, NGO, CBO, or neighborhood, or our society's managing committee, wherever we see discrimination, we have to fight against it, and we also need to voice our concern. मांगे बिना माँ भी नहीं देती, तो सरकार माई बाप या बाहर वाले क्या देंगे? So we have to press our demand, and we have to mobilize public opinion. I think that is going to take us, and whatever hurdles we are facing, हम होंगे कामयाब. We shall overcome.
Absolutely. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your remarks. Ma'am, now we are setting ourselves to close the session. So before we close, if I can go to Shifalika ma'am for 30 seconds to 1 minute as to what
but
are
I think
your...
there are 13 questions.
Yes, ma'am. So what we were thinking is we have very good participation over Facebook as well, and there are a number of questions from there. So because we intend to wrap and Ranjana ma'am is not feeling quite good. So what we intend to do is we would collate all the questions and put it on the website. And since Ranjana ma'am is working on the article, so maybe she can incorporate those questions also in your article, ma'am, and then we can put it on the website. That would
Yes,
be...
at least mention those questions so that
Yes.
the people start thinking in that direction.
Sure.
Email them to me. I will answer them individually.
Yeah.
All right, ma'am. That would be great. So before that, ma'am, I would like to invite Shifalika ma'am for her 1 minute of response as to what your views are as the way forward for policy directions. आपका क्या विचार है, ma'am? अगर आप कुछ briefly बता दें.
हेलो
जी
सिमी, हेलो.
सुनाई दे रहा है.
आपका अच्छे से मैं सुन नहीं पाई, एक बार आप रिपीट करें प्लीज.
Your views on the way forward, how are we going to move forward? क्योंकि काफी डिस्कशन हो गया है, तो अगर कुछ आपको ऐड करना है उसमें तो you can add. Otherwise
ऐड तो इस तरीके के चीजों को यदि हम किसी भी जगह पे भागीदारी किसी की चाह रहे हैं तो आंदोलित करने के अलावा मुझे और कोई रास्ता नहीं दिखाई देता। तो मुझे लगता है कि हमारे लिए और रंजना कुमारी और विभूति पटेल और इस तरीके के और भी बहुत सारी महिलाओं की जरूरत है, और केवल महिलाओं की नहीं, हमें इसके साथ साथ पुरुष को भी साथ लेकर चलना होगा, तभी हम कुछ कर सकते हैं। मैं ये नहीं मानती कि पुरुष अलग है और महिलाएं अलग हैं। जब तक हम साथ लेकर दोनों को नहीं चलेंगे, हम कोई भी आंदोलन नहीं जीत सकते हैं। हम कभी भी अपने जो हमने मंजिल तय किया है, हम वहां पर नहीं पहुंच सकते हैं। तो हमें बहुत ज्यादा लोगों के साथ जाकर के मिलकर काम करने की जरूरत है। इसके अलावा मुझे और कोई रास्ता नहीं दिखता, और हमें फाइट करना है। विदाउट फाइट हमें कुछ नहीं मिल सकता है। जब तक हम फाइटर नहीं बनेंगे, हम कुछ जीत नहीं सकते हैं। कुछ लड़े बिना हम कुछ नहीं जीत सकते हैं। वो मैम ने भी कहा, और ये मैं भी कह रही हूँ, और सभी यही कहेंगे कि हमें फाइट करने के अलावा और कोई रास्ता नहीं है। और वो रिजर्वेशन हो या घर की लड़ाई, घर में अपना जगह पाने की बात हो, जब तक हम आवाज नहीं उठाएंगे हम कुछ नहीं कर सकते हैं। इसलिए अपनी आवाज को और ज्यादा बुलंद करना होगा। और शिक्षा का क्षेत्र हो, कला का क्षेत्र हो, सिनेमा का क्षेत्र हो, नृत्य हो, संगीत हो, या फिर पॉलिटिकल फील्ड हो, हर जगह हमें अपने आप को दिखाने के लिए, अपनी उपस्थिति दर्ज कराने के लिए हमें बहुत ही मजबूती से और बहुत ही फर्म तरीके से अपने आप को रखना होगा। क्योंकि हमें हमारी जिससे लड़ाई है वो बहुत पुरानी लड़ाई है, और दे आर इन वेरी बहुत फर्म टाइप के चीजें हैं। बहुत ये संस्थान है, एक तरीके से आप इसको कह लीजिए, जिससे लड़ाई है आपकी है, वो बहुत संगठित तरीके से लड़ रहे हैं। और हमें उनसे बहुत ही संगठित तरीके से, बहुत संयमित तरीके से उनसे लड़ना होगा। तो फाइट के अलावा और कोई रास्ता नहीं है। तो वी विल फाइट, वी विल विन। That's all.
Yes, we shall
Thank
fight,
you.
we shall win. I can also remember Awaaz Do Hum Ek Hain to move towards this realization. Thank you, Shifalika ma'am.
Yes.
And Professor G. Sri Devi, आप सुन पा रही हैं तो if you
Yeah,
can.
I can hear you, Simi. See, in my view, I do agree with Shifali that we have to fight and we have to question. Along with that, if you look into the discrimination against the elected Dalit representatives, both men and women, it has been a constant feature in the three-tier local bodies, especially in Tamil Nadu. Various studies are there. Since the elections have started from 1996, many elected Dalit presidents were killed, driven out of their village, or forced to remain as a puppets of the dominant caste bodies. And we also have seen that where a Dalit woman was not allowed to do the flag hosting during the independence, and then one Dalit woman was forced to sit on a floor, although the other person belonged to the other marginalized groups. So unless until we question the social equality and reduce the social discrimination, talking about the gender equality, I'm not very sure how far we'll be able to reach. So we need to address the social discrimination, try to focus on the equal treatment coming from the equal caste groups, whether it is women or the men, the treatment should be similar. Then access to the economic resources. I strongly believe that access to the education and the resources, especially land and common resources, do play a very, very crucial role in rising the woman voice in the form of the empowerment or even in the decision making at the local body levels. So in my view, we need to address the social discrimination. Without talking the social discrimination, talking about the equal rights to women, we may not be able to successfully achieve it. For that, we need both economic access to the resources.
Thank you.
So much. Ranjana ma'am, अगर आपको closing कुछ अगर you want to express something or you have.
नहीं, ठीक है, मुझे लगता है समय हो गया है और हम लोग फिर से चर्चा में मैं आऊंगी आपके बीच में, थोड़ा सा और बेहतर बोलने दीजिए.
Thank you ma'am, ये बहुत encouraging है. Thank you. So thank you so much. I would now formally propose the vote of thanks, and I would also like to acknowledge our participants in joining in full capacity and also over Facebook, and especially those who have posed your questions, Chanda Asani ji, Dr. Muthuraja Chinnasamy ji, Neil Webster, Mr. Sanjay Gupta, Riddhi Kapoor, Nagmani Rao ma'am, Jagriti Shankar, Alpana Borgohain, and all those, and also on Facebook, Chitra Lele madam. So all of you, please watch out, and we'll also send you once we have received the responses for your questions from Ranjana ma'am, and we'll definitely engage in a conversation with Ranjana ma'am once again, and that the green signal for which has already been provided by ma'am herself. So with this, I would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of the Gender Impact Studies Center, Impact and Policy Research Institute. I thank our chair for the session, Professor Vibhuti Patel, for leading this discussion, and without her motivation and guidance, this would not have been possible. Our discussants for the day, Professor G. Sri Devi, Dr. Shifalika Shekhar, and most of all, Professor Ranjana Kumari. Thank you so much for your participation. All of you who were watching here on Facebook Live and on Zoom, and of course, Team IMPRI. Thank you so much. Your contributions are really welcome, and we'll continue to keep this intellectual discourses going, and looking forward to greater engagement. Thank you so much. I wish you all a very good evening.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you, ma'am.
Namaskar to all of you. Thank you. I'm moving. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Vibhuti ma'am.
Bye. 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 Thank you.